Rolling. Okay. I'm here with my mentor, Mr. Adrian. We're going to review my baseline lesson. So, what'd you think, Mr. Adrian?
Yeah, I thought it went really, really well. The conversation got going early, and I liked the way that you related the topic to Vietnam, and you got them talking about Viet Cong Bank and some of the banks here and some of the sort of issues I think their parents had talked about with banks, etc. Right?
Yeah.
Cindy was saying that the parents use HSBC because it's more secure, and
yeah, which is a foreign bank.
It's quite cool that they knew so much about it actually, because I think one area that kids these days don't know enough about is economics and how to look after your situation.
Exactly, and Stephen as well. They were both hyper aware of instances where people lost all their money because the bank failed.
Right.
In the States we have federal deposit insurance, and I'm sure in the UK there's some safety net as well. But yeah, I tried as much as I could to relate to their culture and their social upbringing when I was discussing what was going into this lesson, which was crime and the media. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it was generally a reading lesson in preparation for oral presentation next week on one of the crimes of the century. So yeah, what did you think of the pacing? I mean, I know the video was edited, but I was a little concerned. I wrote in my review for myself about transitions, moving from one topic to the next. It was a small group, but I wanted to make sure that I was holding their attention. So yeah, any other input you have, fire away.
Yeah, no, it looked to me like you were holding their attention, and you went through the relevant steps. You pre-taught the vocabulary that you wanted them to use. You used gist reading. You were explicit about how they were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So I felt like it's step by step until you got to the more complex task, which was the note taking, where they had to read in detail and provide more detailed notes. I felt like they were totally ready by that point to do that because of the steps that you'd gone through. So I didn't really think you had anything to worry about regards
Scaffolding. Yeah.
No, there we go. Scaffolding.
Good
Exactly.
word.
Mm-hmm.
The standard one, we're supposed to deal with the in-task standard one, learner development. The candidate understands how students grow and develop, recognizing that patterns of learning and development vary individually within and across the cognitive, linguistic, social, emotional, and physical areas, and designs and implements developmentally appropriate, challenging learning experiences. So that's a long way of saying I'm aware of how my students may learn, or the background differences they may have, and I'm sympathetic to that. I tried my best, like you said, I tried my best to relate that to Vietnam, and actually I was pretty curious about how things work, so did my best to relate that, but I also had my own requirements, my own standard to present information, findings, and supporting evidence clearly and concisely and logically, such that listeners can follow the line of reasoning, and the organization, development, substance, and style are appropriate for the purpose. So that's more of a project for next lesson, which is going to be an oral presentation. So any areas that you could point to, things I can work on for the next lesson?
Just a quick question then. So I know that, for example, Cindy is quite far ahead,
yeah,
and maybe Andrew is not. Just for the simple reason she's in the first language and has been for 2 years. Andrew's in the second language. How do you find that in terms of differentiation then in that class?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I implemented a pretty high standard for vocabulary words earlier on in the year, and Cindy, of course, is knocking it out of the park, as you said, and doing just fine. And Andrew at first was kind of lagging until I kind of took him aside and explained exactly what I was looking for in vocabulary words. He upped his scores. So what I've actually been doing is differentiating by giving Cindy maybe not more work, but more in-depth work, or some advanced vocabulary words. But great point. I mean, kind of runs the gamut. Stephen's in the middle, Cindy's up here, and Andrew is at a lower level. But yeah, that's something you'll see going forward. I'm gonna have to differentiate for every lesson. I think the material in that lesson, for the most part, was pretty clear to Andrew, but there were some questions. I know in some portions of the video I left in where he did ask questions, and I was able to assist, but I'll have to keep an eye out for that going forward, for sure.
And then one little thing, maybe this is a personal, idea of mine, but at the beginning of the video, you sort of, you get them kind of going,
Yeah.
and you sort of do it kind of, right, come on guys,
Yep,
I'm not in the room, it might be the way that the recording is anyway, but it sounded quite jarring, I thought, that clap.
Yeah.
So it might be better in terms of, a more sort of calm environment. I know you want to get them sort of awake, but for me that was just slightly loud, so I thought,
Agreed.
Actually, I know that client, I do know all three of those students, they're all pretty confident, etc. But I suppose if you were with a student who was kind of shy and meek, something like that, they might find it a bit intimidating, I thought. So that if you want, one piece of constructive criticism, I'd say that might be it. It's a
good point. When I viewed it, I agreed. It was like, wow, that's louder than I thought. I was worried about the volume because they said if you can't hear us, we're gonna have to redo it.
Right.
So I was kind of, but I think I was a little nervous just to make sure they were paying attention.
I thought that was maybe also was the first video recording.
Yeah, and they were a little like, what's the camera about?
Even Cindy was saying, "Oh, why are you talking like that?"
Yeah, and Cindy was doing something. She's a great student, but she's like minor OCD. She was erasing a piece of paper while I'm trying to start the lesson.
Goodness,
Anyway, it was a great point when I saw that we have to include the beginning of the lesson no matter what. I would have loved to have cut that little portion out. But
anyway, it's a small thing really, and I think it was fine for that class, but I thought I'd mention it.
Great.
But that's really good. You've obviously put a great deal of care into planning that lesson and thinking about how it's to be differentiated and making it. I guess the key things here are the cultural relevance, right? Really, that's what we're sort of looking for.
Yeah.
And I definitely felt that that occurred because you were talking about their own countries.
Yeah, that was kind of job one for this first one. So.
And it was nice that most of them had something to say as well, because
Yeah, I was a little worried it'd be like pulling teeth to get some responses because you want more student input, and I need to try to make this more student-centered. Once you get them going, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I learned as well, which is
exactly. So did I.
All right. Anything else to add here? I think that's.
No, I think we can wrap that up for me.
Great.
Unless you've got anything else you want to ask, or.
I've asked some stuff kind of to you off camera, but I like you said, I put a lot of time and thought into this one, trying to make sure I have my first lesson go over well. But I think you're kind of spot on about the things you pointed out, and I'll adjust going forward. But I appreciate the time.
Okay.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.